But if individuals behave badly and say this is our culture, that's not on, and we should challenge it at all times. And challenge it in an equal way, not looking down on one community or another.
I'm Emma Trimble, and this is GBN Originals. I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by Lord Singh today to talk about the announcement of a national inquiry, finally, into the grooming gang's abuse, and also the Casey review and the findings of that report. So thank you so much, Lord Singh, for joining me to discuss this. So can we begin by talking about what we might expect this inquiry to look into? Because, of course, there is a racially aggravated aspect to a lot of the evidence that victims have given, talking about their abuse, certain racial slurs that were used against them. But there's also a community, cultural and religious dynamic to this that perhaps has been overlooked with respect to the Sikh community.
I think that's absolutely true, but I think it's been overlooked with all communities. Sikhs have been just brushed aside, the suffering in the Sikh community. But I think the whole issue needs looking at in a very scientific way, if I may say so. If we have a problem, a medical problem, a threat, medical threat, what do? We try and pinpoint the cause. Now, if we have a social problem, particularly if it might be linked to religion, what do? We try to camouflage the cause, to hide it away. Now, that is the thing that worries me most, because, first of all, grooming gangs were mentioned, and it was suggested that they were mainly Asian grooming gangs. Now, the Asian word is pretty broad. If I were to say Europeans were responsible for the Holocaust, many people would take offense, because that is not pinpointing the blame in the right direction. Asian diffuses it. Now we're moving on to ethnicity. Now, even that's a step in the right direction. It doesn't go far enough, because ethnicity has many attributes: color of skin, the diet, and all sorts of things like that. And under ethnicity, as shown in the Mandla case, there is one subset: religion. Now, we've got to move in that direction, because if we want to pinpoint the cause, we want to see why certain people are more likely to go into this grooming crime than other people. Now, religion itself, we've got this very cozy attitude in the West, arising from the horrors of interreligious persecution in the past between Catholics and Protestants and other smaller groups, where it's polite not to talk about religion. Now, unfortunately, religion is not just ethics. The ethics of religion is a very small part. It's right at the bottom. On top of that, we have culture, superstition, ritual, and we have to look into the culture to find the cause of these sort of crimes. Now, looking into the culture of religion, at the time, many of the religious texts, particularly the Old Testament texts, particularly the Quran, were written, the advice on the treatment of women was probably enlightened. But by today's measure, it is totally wrong and unacceptable.
There are, and this is something that the historian Tom Holland has pointed out, there are sources within the Quran, within the Hadith, within early biographies of the Prophet Muhammad that permit things like, for example, sexual slavery, and references in the Bible to it being halal for a person to not just have sexual intercourse with their wife, but also with those who their right hand and possesses, referring to sex slaves. And we've seen even here very recently a preacher a Muslim preacher going on a tour of the United
Yes.
Kingdom who had been filmed previously making references to this and explaining that it is permissible in Islam to have sex with sex slaves. So how do you understand the role of religion specifically within the
It,
grooming gangs, and what the sources are
yeah.
of that
It,
cultural aspect?
You are absolutely right to pinpoint. It is worse than that. There are lots of passages in the Quran that demean women in every right, in inheritance, in the treatment of women. If a man, if a woman commits a sordid act, what let's put it that way, detain her for the rest of her life. If a man commits that sort of offense and repents, forgive him. It says also, women are your fields, go to them as you please. It also says that men should keep, was enlightened at that time, keep to their wives, but women captured in warfare are a different thing. You can do what you like to them. They're kafirs, that is, other people, non-Muslims, who can be treated badly. Now, that is not the ethics of Islam. There's many wonderful teachings in Islam, but that is the culture that has become embedded in the Quran and scriptures. Now, my take is that in all religions, we should look at the culture, and that which is not in tune with common sense in today's times, discard it. And that should be the role of preachers and religious leaders. They're not, they just turn the other way.
One of the grooming gang survivors, a woman who uses the pseudonym Ella Hill, gave evidence of her own abuse and described certain slurs. You mentioned there, that this relates to non-Muslims, and some of those slurs related to her being a kafir, and a derogatory term for a non-Muslim. And this is something that has happened not only to white, mostly working class British girls in northern towns particularly, but also to some Sikh girls. Isn't that right?
Absolutely right, and it's gone on for many years. And it's not just Sikh girls and a Muslim going to Sikh, taking advantage of Sikh girls. In the 21st century, where different communities are meeting together, living together, societies are moving around the world, we cannot have that sort of treatment by one community of another community. We must look to the proper law under the teachings and to the underlying ethics of religion, because the culture has taken over. The in Jesus Christ was very complimentary to women, but if you go to St. Paul, women should be silent in church. Now, that sort of thing. Now, within the Sikh religion, admittedly, it's a much later religion, there is very positive guidance that you treat women as absolutely equals. In fact, they're slightly more equal than men, because we're given the name Singh, which means lion-like, for courage. They're given the name, women are called Kaur, princess. And then the attitude where men behave really badly is during wartime. Sikh soldiers were asked to treat enemy women as either mother, sister, or daughter, depending on
It's
age. That is with
very different
respect.
cultural attitude to the way that, say, Islamic State treated
It's
Yazidi
much
or
more,
Christian.
that was with the hindsight that gurus saw what was happening and just said that this is all wrong. This is how we should treat
So
women. They
So
must be
what you're
treated with
saying really
respect.
is that culture is important, that culture has consequences, and that's something
Yes.
that we in Britain have become particularly uncomfortable with talking about when it comes to the
Yes.
implications of certain religious beliefs, because there is a sort of I think a fairly widespread assumption that all religions are effectively the same, when that isn't necessarily the case, and that all scriptures have the same core meaning, when again that isn't necessarily the case in terms of their
They
cultural
don't.
implications. Why do you think it is
Yeah.
that we find it so difficult as a society to be able to talk about the implications of the beliefs that people hold, and to be able to actually make judgments between them and say that one thing is better than another?
It goes back to the sort of historical context where there was so much conflict between religions. It became respectable not to talk about religions or culture. It's their culture, it doesn't matter. Now, culture can be really good. And Aaron Bevin was a genius. He said, when anyone talks about culture, I think of bacteria. Now, he was more right than he realized, because today we know bacteria can be good and bad. The bacteria in yogurt helps us. That is good. There is nasty bacteria. And in the same way, there's good culture like respect for other people, politeness, courtesy. These things are good. There's also a nasty element to culture. Look down on other people because we are superior. Now, that is totally unacceptable, because today in the 21st century, we need to understand that no one is superior, no one is inferior. We're all equal, somewhat um, uh, uh, slight, not very competent human beings, but we're all equal. And we should be looked at that way. That means even words like Islamophobia, anti Semitism, they don't help, because they're promoting one group over another. Defend this group, defend that group. Why not defend every group and every
Well,
person?
part of what you're describing, I think, is the sort of prevailing idea that being non-judgmental is somehow virtuous, that tolerance means not actually exercising any judgment, any value judgment whatsoever. And I know that you've had personal experiences of, things like accusations of Islamophobia and so on. Why would you say that the reason why society, why governments, why people in institutions haven't been able to properly address the grooming gang scandal is partly because, and something that I think, there's been evidence of this for quite a long time, and Louise Casey was just simply repeating what had already been
Yeah.
known, which is that the reason why this
Yes.
hasn't been tackled is because people did not want to be perceived as Islamophobia, and as a result, as Islamophobic, and as a result,
Yes.
they have actually committed a much worse evil.
Absolutely. You got it spot on. That does happen. That trying to be polite, there should be a limit to tolerance. Be tolerant about uh, uh, people's behavior, color of skin or dress. That doesn't really particularly matter much. That's up to individuals. But if individuals behave badly and say this is our culture, that's not on, and we should challenge it at all times. And challenge it in an equal way, not looking down on one community or another
Why
community.
do you think, though, that the in their non-judgmentalism that they were more likely to tolerate and not judge or act on the abuse of children, the sexual abuse and rape of children, and they felt that that was somehow less of a sin than the possibility of being accused of being prejudicial in some way against the Muslim community?
It is so skewed. The crimes against children, I can't think of anything much worse than that. To be accused of, we're all prejudiced. This is another thing that should be made clear. We all have our prejudice. It's a natural instinct with us. We are programmed to fear difference. So if we don't go up to a lion and stroke it pussy or something like that, we are wary of it. But we should distinguish between rational prejudice, which is quite sensible to be defensive, and irrational prejudice, which is just looking down on the way other people behave just because they are not like us. And that is not very clever. It is not very
But it's
helpful.
interesting that as a society, we are the one thing that we are judgmental of is other people being prejudiced. And it was the fear of
Yeah.
being accused of being prejudiced, as if that was the worst thing somebody could be accused
Yes.
of, that prevented people from acting to stop this abuse. But at the same time, it seems quite clear
Yeah.
from the evidence of grooming gang survivors that there was an element of racial and religious prejudice involved in these sex
Yeah.
crimes, and yet society seems to be incapable, and government and institutions seems to be incapable of condemning prejudice when it comes from particular groups.
Absolutely. And that is fear of causing offense to a large group or civil unrest, and also, sadly, to losing votes amongst politicians. That is an important factor that shouldn't be forgotten. Regarding the way people behave, we should not take offense. That I don't mind if someone believes that the earth is flat. I do object if they try and push me off the edge. There are limits to tolerance and respect.
But I mean, there are some people who would say, for example, that the Sikh religion itself is in some way Islamophobic because of its historical origins. And yet it seems that within multiculturalism, even though it feigns to be sort of neutral and even handed in the way that it treats different communities and no one community is privileged over the other, in practice, it seems actually that some communities are privileged over each other, and they're usually privileged according to how much trouble the authorities think that they might cause if they're upset. And so it seems actually, even in the grooming gang case of the grooming gang scandal, that the Muslim community in some ways has been privileged, and Islam has been privileged over Sikhism and the Sikh community.
Yeah, no, that is right. But you say that in some ways, the Sikh religion is biased against Islam. It's not, because the Guru saw just what was going on, religions fighting over things, fighting over sensible things and trivial things. And they made it very clear and were courageously, they criticized negative culture and negative behavior, like that attitudes to women. They criticized those in different religions. At the same time, they showed great respect for ethical teachings that most people don't realize, that within our holy book, the Guru Granth Sahib, there are passages written by Muslim and Hindu saints. They incorporated the good and criticized the evil that causes hurt to fellow human beings.
Do you think that the term Islamophobia?
Just on that last point, just on that last point, it was the Guru invited a Muslim saint to lay down the foundation stone for the Golden Temple. It's a great
But of course,
respect.
a lot of the people who might make these accusations, it's not necessarily based in fact, but it's based in perception. So what is it that you would like to see from this grooming gangs inquiry that has just been announced? Is there something that you are particularly hoping that they will look into diligently, or are there particular areas that maybe you think there's a risk that they might not take as much, might not pay as much attention to as you might like?
Well, it's a personal thing. I very much want religion to be looked at, because it is not only in sexual behavior that there is concern, but there is, that would be a wonderful start. But my concern is much greater, because religions, as I mentioned, have an ethical component which is very similar across different religions, but it is buried with all the culture and superstition and ritual, and also with an arrogance that we are better than anyone else and we have the rights over other people. Now, and we can propagate and force those rights on others, which, if you look at the world as it is today, most of the conflicts have that sort of religious dimensions. Most of them do. That religion is used as an excuse to demean or others, or to show our superiority.
You, of course, are in the House of Lords. How do your colleagues feel about this? Is there much support for wanting more scrutiny and more information about the religious aspect of this, or do you think that actually that attitude still prevails, that this is too much of a sensitive subject and should probably be left alone?
Well, I think attitudes, and I've been there some 15 years, I think, and attitudes are changing, but very, very slowly. What I see is people grow up with one culture, one religion, one history, and we are, and it's echoed in Shakespeare so many times about other people being inferior. That is the way we're brought up. We look with one eye, and the one eye of culture and religion. Um, I've been fortunate and perhaps unfortunate in ways to be able to look with two eyes, and that is other cultures, looking from the aspect of other cultures and other religions, and seeing I think, clearer picture, which has been enhanced uh, as time goes by with the hindsight of age, having seen things before. That, that all helps. But we need to look in today's world away from this one idea of we are the correct people, the good people, and so on. And we've got to put up with these foreigners, but we'll do our best. We've got to realize we are all one equal humanity. We're all equally crazy or equally good. We laugh at the same things. We cry at the same things. There is no real difference. It's superficial difference, and the difference brought on by this cultural arrogance.
Now, I have to say, I've never met an unpatriotic Sikh, and I imagine that the Sikh community must have some pretty strong views on the grooming gangs issue, but tend to be overlooked in terms of the public actually hearing what Sikhs particularly think about this issue. So what is the view of the Sikh community? Is this something that is a particular concern that people are aware of? Is there, are they sort of rooting for the inquiry to look into these religious issues in the same way that you are?
The inquiry is going in the right direction, which is good. And Sikhs have been very upset by the way, particularly by the way that Muslim men dressed as Sikhs to lure Sikh girls. That was very upsetting. And some, sadly, took it in their sort of vigilante action in their own hands. Now, that is wrong. But just on the whole principle of this protecting one religion over another, words like Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, that what has been going on is that those people make noises and look, we're being bullied and hurt. We want government support. Okay, have funds, collect statistics, and they collect statistics to show that they're more discriminated against other people, although other people don't have the opportunity to collect statistics. And it's worse with Sikhs. We are told within our religious teachings to get on with this life, never mind these trivial upsets, just make the best of it. And we have what we call the spirit of chardikala, that is, always look to the positive. Now, if we always look to the positive, uh, it's we are less of a complaining community, and therefore we don't get the government support that others might
Complaining is
get.
power. Are you concerned?
Well, one minister put it to me, one government minister. It's the wheel that squeaks that gets the oil.
Are you concerned, in a sort of brief final word, about the balkanization of society? People are talking about that a lot at the moment. Are you fearful that community relations, that multiculturalism has really gotten to a sort of crisis point?
It's went so far where you could meet together and share tea and samosas, and we were being good people. But we need to go much, much further to realize that those other people are not okay. They're just as crazy as we are and just as good as we are.
Thank you so much, Lord Singh, for joining us today. And don't forget, everyone, to like and
Thanks.
subscribe. Let us know what you think in the comments. Thank you for watching.